You want to judge somebody, you want to find out whether they're cool or not. If they want something from
You want to judge someone to see if they're truly the person everyone thinks they are. In Hollywood, charm is currency, and smiles can hide far more than they reveal. For decades, James Garner carried a bitter truth about someone the world adored, a truth that never made it into headlines or tabloids. It wasn't about fame or fortune, nor about awards or accolades. It was about Doris Day, America's sweetheart, and what he saw behind the carefully polished image that millions fell in love with. At 85, Garner finally opened up about the complexity of working with Day, revealing a side of her that few ever witnessed. To fans, their film sparkled with laughter, flirtation, and effortless chemistry. But in private, the reality was far more layered, far more complicated than any camera could capture. Hollywood thrives on appearances, but it rarely shows the cracks beneath the glitter. And for Garner, one particular day on set would crystallize a truth that stayed with him for decades. The world knew Doris Day as the Golden Girl, the epitome of sweetness and charm. Garner, on the other hand, was rugged, direct, and refreshingly unpolished. Their on-screen chemistry was undeniable, their banter impeccable. But chemistry in front of the camera doesn't always reflect friendship behind it. What James Garner's reflections reveal is a story of admiration tempered by caution, of a man who valued authenticity over performance, discovering that not all smiles are sincere. In the early 1960s, James Garner and Doris Day became one of Hollywood's most beloved screen pairings. Their films, The Thrill of It All and Move Over Darling, captured audiences with their sparkling energy, perfect comedic timing, and seemingly effortless charm. On paper, they were the ideal couple, glamorous, witty, and endlessly photogenic. But the reality behind the camera often diverged from what the public adored. Garner had already established himself as a dependable television star, known for his rugged charisma and no-nonsense approach to acting. He wasn't interested in Hollywood theatrics or studio politics. Day, meanwhile, was the quintessential starlet, carefully cultivated by studios who demanded perfection at all times. Every smile, gesture, and word was part of a larger persona that audiences had grown to love. To the world, she was warm, approachable, and endlessly gracious, a symbol of post-war optimism. Their first collaboration, The Thrill of It All, was a box office success, lauded for its humor and chemistry. Fans swooned over the playful dynamics between Garner's dry wit and Day's sparkling charm. Press tours and interviews painted a picture of camaraderie and friendship. Studio executives, aware of the pair's appeal, were quick to amplify every sign of closeness, posing the two together in glossy photographs and staged playful moments that fed fan obsession. Yet despite the public narrative, some on set whispered that the connection wasn't as effortless behind the scenes. Crew members noted subtle tensions, fleeting moments that didn't make it into the final cut. Garner's laid-back, straightforward demeanor often clashed with the meticulous control Day's image demanded, though both professionals in their craft, their backgrounds and approaches to work were fundamentally different. One favored authenticity, the other polish. And while audiences only saw the latter, Garner's private reflections hinted at a deeper, more complicated story. To the world, James Garner and Doris Day were inseparable. Fans believed their on-screen magic was rooted in genuine friendship. Interviews suggested warmth, laughter, and mutual admiration. But appearances, as Garner learned, can be deceptive. Hollywood thrives on crafting illusions, and studio machinery worked tirelessly to maintain Day's pristine image, often at the expense of authenticity. Garner, who had a reputation for honesty and reliability, often found himself navigating the gap between perception and reality. Behind the cameras, he observed behavior that didn't always align with Day's public persona. She was charming, yes, but it was a calculated charm, designed to elicit admiration and protect the carefully constructed image studios demanded. Her gestures, smiles, and attentions were often measured, precise, and occasionally detached. Crew. Members recounted moments where Day's actions seemed intentionally distant or strategically timed. In private, Garner noted such instances with a mixture of surprise and wariness. He was used to actors being temperamental or dramatic, but Day's ability to mask intent, to maintain an impeccable exterior while remaining emotionally distant, stood out. Her image, adored by millions, concealed layers Garner would come to recognize as both fascinating and, at times, unsettling. It wasn't malice. It was a strategy. Hollywood demanded perfection, and Day delivered it relentlessly. But for Garner, who valued genuine human connection, the artifice was difficult to reconcile with the warmth he expected from colleagues. What he saw and what the world believed diverged sharply, leaving him to navigate a delicate balance of professionalism, admiration, and private skepticism. Garner's private journals offer the most candid window into his thoughts. Publicly, he praised Day politely and with careful wording, but privately, his words revealed tension and intrigue. One entry, particularly striking, read, "She knows how to get what she wants, and she knows when to play innocent. That is the dangerous part." It is a line that captures both admiration and wariness, reflecting the complexity of his experience on set. Across multiple entries, Garner returned repeatedly to observations about Day, noting moments that lingered in his memory long after filming ended. Some were minor, almost imperceptible gestures, a glance, a tone of voice, a measured smile. Others were more substantial, indicating a strategic awareness in how she interacted with others. For a man who prided himself on authenticity and integrity, these moments left a mark. Interviews later in life reflected the same careful balance. Garner smiled, offered measured praise, and spoke with professional courtesy, but the depth of emotion found in his private writings was absent. It was as if he had internalized a private understanding of Day's methods, one that he neither fully condemned nor fully celebrated. Hollywood thrives on surface impressions. Yet Garner's reflections remind us that even the most charming smiles can mask complexity, and that the truth often resides in the subtle, unseen moments. The defining moment came during the filming of Move Over Darling. The scene, ostensibly comedic, required Garner to perform a physically demanding gag involving a bathtub, a slippery floor, and precise timing. Garner, known for performing his own stunts, took the challenge seriously, believing it added authenticity to his performance. But this particular scene would test both his body and his perception of those around him. As cameras rolled, Garner slipped harder than expected, falling awkwardly and injuring his shoulder, tearing ligaments in the process. The crew rushed to assist, cutting cameras and halting production. Pain was immediate and intense, but what struck Garner even more was Day's reaction. Accounts vary, but the consensus among those present was that she appeared distant, almost detached. There was no instinctive gesture of concern, no immediate offer of help. To Garner, who had grown up valuing empathy and collaboration, her response was shocking. Later, in his autobiography, he recounted the moment with unusual clarity, emphasizing not just the injury, but the emotional weight of her detachment. For a man accustomed to solidarity and camaraderie, the experience left him feeling blindsided and betrayed. It wasn't cruelty, he suggested, but a subtle calculation, a focus on performance and image over human connection. This moment, brief yet intense, defined their relationship from that point onward. Studio executives had long managed public perception, but this incident revealed the human reality beneath the image. Garner realized that charm could be strategic, that appearances could mask priorities that diverged from personal values. The physical pain of his injury was temporary. The emotional impression, however, endured for decades, shaping how he remembered Doris Day long after the cameras stopped rolling. Following that day, Garner's mentions of Day in interviews became noticeably scarce, where other co-stars reminisced. About humorous or endearing moments, he remained silent or offered brief clinical praise. It wasn't bitterness in the traditional sense. Garner was a man respected for his collegiality, but it was a reflection of disappointment and recognition of a deeper divide. Hollywood, always focused on optics, continued to present the pair as friends, colleagues, and co-stars, but Garner's perspective remained private. Those closest to him noted that the incident and its implications left a lasting impression. For someone who navigated the industry with integrity, the encounter was a lesson in discernment, a reminder that not every smile signals sincerity, and that charm, while captivating, can be a careful strategy rather than a reflection of character. Over time, Garner's legacy became intertwined with tales of professionalism, wit, and charm, yet the story of his experience with Day remained a quietly held truth. It was a narrative not of scandal or malice, but of observation, a nuanced understanding of a person who, like many in Hollywood, balanced public adoration with private strategy. In Hollywood, where every gesture is scrutinized and every smile is a performance, truth often hides in plain sight. James Garner's reflections on Doris Day remind us that the reality behind fame and glamour is rarely as simple as it appears. Charm can be carefully measured, and admiration can coexist with caution. For Garner, the lesson was clear. Authenticity is rare, and perception is not always reality. Even decades later, the memory of that one fateful day lingered, shaping his understanding of human behavior, of work, and of trust. In a world obsessed with image, Garner's quiet observations offer a glimpse behind the curtain, a reminder that sometimes the most revealing moments are those we carry silently, long after the applause has faded. Doris Day, to the world, remained a symbol of warmth, charm, and timeless grace. To Garner, she was also a reminder of complexity, calculation, and the subtle ways that appearances can both illuminate and deceive. In the end, the story is not one of animosity, but of insight, perspective, and the enduring search for authenticity in a world built on illusion. Beyond the pivotal bathtub scene, Garner's journals were filled with small moments that painted a more nuanced picture of Day on set. She was professional, punctual, and polished, but there was always a sense that her actions were calculated for maximum effect. Garner noted instances where she would charm directors or producers with the same effortless grace she displayed in front of the cameras, while maintaining a certain emotional distance from co-stars. One crew member recalled a moment during a lunch break when Garner casually joked with several assistants, and Day walked in, smiled at the group, but immediately returned to her trailer without joining. Garner observed this quietly, noting the contrast between her public warmth and private detachment. To an outsider, it might have seemed trivial, but for Garner, it reinforced a pattern he had already begun to recognize: a careful choreography of perception versus reality. Yet despite these observations, he often admired her craft. Her timing, her instinct for comedy, and her ability to convey innocence on screen were undeniable. Garner's reflections show a man who could respect talent, even while questioning personality, highlighting the duality of Hollywood relationships where admiration and skepticism often coexist. Studio executives were acutely aware of the marketability of the Garner-Day pairing. Every interview, press tour, and photograph was orchestrated to maximize fan engagement. Yet the pressures behind the camera were intense. Garner often found himself navigating demands that had little to do with acting and more to do with maintaining a public narrative. Day's image was carefully curated. Smiles had to be perfect, gestures calculated, and no emotion could stray too far from the wholesome persona the studios had spent years cultivating. Garner, whose reputation rested on authenticity, often found this restrictive, yet he adapted, performing professionally while internally noting the dissonance. His journals reveal a man observing not just an actress, but an entire system designed to protect illusion over reality. The tension wasn't personal, it was structural. Hollywood thrived on image, and Day embodied the ideal. Garner's respect for her talent existed alongside a recognition that her behavior was shaped by forces beyond her control. This subtle understanding added layers to his reflections, portraying both the human and systemic elements at play. Garner's experiences with Day shaped his broader understanding of relationships in Hollywood. He realized that charm, while enticing, is often a tool used for negotiation, influence, or preservation of image. Authentic friendship was rare, and public adoration could mask personal complexities. His private notes reflect a man who valued sincerity above spectacle, learning to navigate both without losing his own integrity. In later interviews, he spoke more generally about co-stars and colleagues, but rarely revisited Day. When he did, his words were measured, acknowledging talent but stopping short of intimacy. It was a cautious approach, shaped by years of observation and experience, and perhaps a subtle lesson in maintaining boundaries while respecting artistry. Fame, he seemed to suggest, is a double-edged sword. It amplifies talent, but it can distort perception, both for the public and for those within the industry. Garner's reflections on Day illustrate the fine line between admiration and realism, and the quiet awareness that not every connection aligns with public expectation. Garner's reflections remain relevant for modern audiences and actors. The story isn't about scandal or betrayal. It's about insight, awareness, and understanding human behavior under pressure. In today's entertainment world, where social media amplifies image and persona, the lessons are even more poignant. Authenticity, Garner seemed to suggest, is a rare commodity, and recognizing it requires both observation and discernment. For young actors or fans, his story serves as a reminder that on-screen magic doesn't always translate to personal connection. Charm and talent are not inherently indicators of sincerity. Garner's nuanced reflections invite us to appreciate skill while remaining aware of the human complexity behind every performance, a perspective as valuable now as it was during the golden age of Hollywood. The public adored James Garner and Doris Day as a duo. Magazines, newspapers, and talk shows constantly highlighted their chemistry, sharing behind-the-scenes friendship stories carefully selected for maximum appeal. Fans wrote letters praising their on-screen rapport, imagining that the playful banter in films reflected a genuine connection off-screen. Studios encouraged this perception, understanding that audience fascination directly translated into box office success. Garner observed this phenomenon with quiet detachment. He was aware that media narratives could be misleading and that public adoration often glossed over real dynamics, yet he understood its power. While Day's carefully maintained charm delighted fans, Garner's more subtle, rugged persona drew respect from peers and insiders who valued authenticity over optics. The contrast between audience perception and personal experience became a recurring theme in his reflections, revealing the tension between image and reality in Hollywood's golden era. This fan-driven pressure wasn't limited to admiration. Every gesture, smile, and interaction on set was scrutinized, often misinterpreted, and sometimes amplified into headlines that misrepresented intent. Garner's awareness of this duality, public excitement versus private experience, shaped his approach to fame, teaching him to maintain personal boundaries while performing professionally. Despite their undeniable on-screen chemistry, moments of real camaraderie between Garner and Day were rare. Garner noted small tensions that never made headlines, a disagreement over rehearsal timing, a differing approach to comedic timing, or subtle clashes in creative interpretation. These instances, while minor to outsiders, accumulated to shape his private perception of Day. One notable example involved a scene in which improvisation was required. Garner, who thrived on spontaneity, noticed that Day adhered strictly to the script, prioritizing precision over playful experimentation. To her, this ensured perfection. To him, it limited authenticity. Such differences, small in isolation, created a quiet distance, missed opportunities for genuine connection, and reinforced Garner's cautious admiration. Over time, Garner seemed to recognize that some relationships in Hollywood were functional rather than personal.